Well, it's a good thing that the violence has stopped, but I wish it was the United States that drove this deal, not Putin and Russia. We should have gotten the agreement with Turkey not to invade the Kurds. There are many of us in Congress, by the way, who have called for a withdrawal. Our troops there were unconstitutional. Senator Rand Paul, Andy Briggs, others have said we should be withdrawing our troops, but we should have done so with a consideration of the Kurds, had our intelligence networks there, and had the Kurdish allies there so that they could prevent the reemergence of ISIS.
Okay, so the reemergence of ISIS has not happened yet. I assume that's a prediction on your behalf.
Well, I hope it doesn't happen.
Is that the prisoners on behalf of ISIS in northeastern Syria, those locations have by and large been secured. Do you have information that contradicts that?
I hope they have been secured. I will take the administration at face value if the Secretary of Defense is saying that. But there were, based on public reporting, some of the ISIS prisoners who had escaped. And so the question we have to ask is, why did the United States not negotiate this earlier? It would have prevented some of the violence against the Kurds. We could have secured the ISIS prisoners. We could have made sure the Kurds had a seat at the table. I mean, they fought shoulder to shoulder with us, and yet this whole deal was Turkey and Russia. They didn't even have a seat at the table.
Well, to be clear about the ISIS prisoners, I understand there might be about 10,000, either fighters or sympathizers. In the early days, it was mostly women and children. And most of the hardened fighters had either been moved to Iraq or were still safely taken care of, sir.
My understanding, again, based on public reporting, is that some of the ISIS prisoners did escape, but I do think that the administration may now have it under control. But I think the bigger issue is this. Look, I've been fair. I've actually, along with Senator Rand Paul, supported the president's call for withdrawing troops. I believe our troops there were unconstitutional. The question is how it was done, and why couldn't we have done so, having leadership and standing with the Kurds, instead of having Putin get the credit for the deal and having Russian influence. So that's my concern.
If the ceasefire holds, will you be convinced otherwise, sir?
If the ceasefire holds, I think that's a good thing, but I still believe, and if ISIS doesn't reemerge, but I still think we could have driven the foreign policy and not had Russia and Putin do it, and I'm concerned that we abandoned our Kurdish allies. I mean, why didn't we stand with them? And look, Turkey is going to listen to the United States. They're dependent on our aid. They're dependent on our military. They're no power compared to the United States. We should have told Erdogan in no uncertain terms, you do not attack our allies, the Kurds. They fought with us, and Erdogan would have listened. So I want to be told,
what we have been told from the White House is that Erdogan's wanted to go in for a year, and it was just a question of time.
But Bill, I mean, I don't think anyone believes that Turkey, a power of no significance compared to the United States, would risk a war with the United States of America. This president could have said, we are going to get our troops out, but I want you to commit that the Kurds are going to have a role in the negotiation. We could have still given them a buffer zone. So, look, I think it's a good thing our troops are coming home. I think it's a good thing that there is a ceasefire. I don't want to take away from that, but I wish that we had stood more with the Kurds and been more involved in driving the negotiations.
So based on some of the other reporting, again, I agree with you. A lot of this is public reporting that we're commenting at the moment. Apparently, in Baghdad, a few hours ago, they announced that they've reached a deal with the U.S. military to move out in about 4 weeks the 1,000 that had crossed from the border in Syria into Iraq. Does that sound right to you?
Based on the public reporting, it does sound right, but I will say this. There was a Russian official who was telling publicly that the United States troops had a few hours to get out, or a few, and then they were basically threatening us to leave. And I don't think that's right. I don't think we ought to be taking orders from Putin or from Turkey about the condition of our withdrawal. I think we ought to be withdrawing, but we ought to be doing it on our terms.
Do you believe at some point you would give the commander-in-chief credit?
I do give him credit, as I publicly supported the call for withdrawal. I said that Senator Rand Paul and I wrote a op-ed and a letter saying that our troops there are unconstitutional. We need to bring our troops home. I've said that the president trying to bring our troops home from Afghanistan is a good thing, but I critique the way it was done.
You know, it's a real messy part of the world. I mean, you know yourself. I mean, it is a wicked brew, and then you try and figure a way out. And to do it in a way that doesn't harm your men and women there.
Absolutely, but I think we could have done so in a way that would have stood shoulder to shoulder with the Kurds who fought with our military men and women against ISIS. We could have said to Turkey that we're going to still have intelligence networks there to support the Kurds, that we get a buffer zone, but that they can't invade, and that we could have prevented the Kurdish displacement. And my concern is what message does this send to our allies, and whether the Kurds now are still going to be willing to fight ISIS, because if they're not willing to fight ISIS, I don't trust Assad or Turkey or Russia to fight ISIS. And so I'm not taking away from the president's call to bring troops home. That I appreciate that part of it.
I appreciate that, sir. Thank you for coming.